Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever stopped to consider the way you speak to yourself? Not just the words, but the tone, the underlying beliefs, the quiet whispers that shape the trajectory of your life. Most people don't realize it, but the dialogue running in their minds, repetitive, critical, sometimes outright destructive, dictates their reality far more than external circumstances ever could. If you spoke to your friends the way you speak to yourself, would they stick around? Or would they walk away, tired of the relentless judgment, the doubt, the self-sabotage? The truth is, the way you talk to yourself is a blueprint for your future. You are not just a passive observer of your thoughts. You are their architect, their enforcer, their master. So today I want to challenge you. Talk to yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Speak to yourself with the same encouragement, wisdom, and discipline you would offer a dear friend. Do this, and you will watch your life transform in ways you never imagined. The way you speak to yourself is one of the most powerful forces shaping your life. Most people go through their days with a constant internal dialogue, but they rarely stop to examine it. They don't realize that the words they use, even in the silence of their own mind, are constructing the framework of their reality. Imagine carrying around a companion who constantly criticizes you, diminishes your efforts, and highlights your every failure. This voice never acknowledges your strengths, never praises your progress, and never offers encouragement when you struggle. If that were another person speaking to you this way, you wouldn't tolerate it for long. You would either distance yourself or confront them about their toxicity. Yet for many, this is exactly how they talk to themselves. People assume their thoughts are just reflections of reality, but they are much more than that. Thoughts are creative forces that shape perception, drive emotions, and determine actions. When you repeatedly tell yourself that you're not good enough, that you always fail, that you can't do something, you are programming yourself to believe those statements. Your mind takes your words seriously. It adapts, reinforcing those beliefs with confirmation bias, seeking out evidence to validate them. The more you say, "I'm terrible at this," the more your brain finds proof to support that claim. The problem is, the mind is not inherently biased toward truth. It is biased toward consistency. It will align itself with whatever narrative you provide. If your words are filled with negativity, your mind will work to uphold that perception. But the reverse is also true. If you choose to speak to yourself with respect, with encouragement, with the same care you would offer someone you love, you create a very different internal landscape. Speaking to yourself with respect does not mean deluding yourself with empty affirmations. It does not mean ignoring your flaws or pretending problems don't exist. Instead, it means acknowledging challenges while maintaining a mindset that allows you to overcome them. It means saying, "This is difficult, but I can figure it out," rather than, "I'll never get this right." It means recognizing your past mistakes without using them as evidence of permanent failure. Self-respect in dialogue also requires recognizing your worth. Many people struggle with this concept because they have internalized the idea that their value is conditional based on external achievements, validation from others, or avoiding mistakes. But the truth is, your worth is inherent. You have a responsibility to treat yourself accordingly. You wouldn't speak to a child learning to walk with ridicule or impatience. You wouldn't berate a close friend for making an honest mistake. So why do you treat yourself that way? People often wait for external validation to grant them permission to believe in themselves. They seek approval from others before allowing themselves to feel competent, worthy, or successful. But external validation is fleeting and unreliable. If you build your self-worth on the opinions of others, you surrender control over your own confidence. The alternative is to build an internal foundation of respect, one that is not shaken by every mistake or criticism. The words you choose in your inner dialogue determine your emotional state. If you constantly criticize yourself, you create an environment of anxiety, stress, and insecurity. On the other hand, if you encourage yourself, even in difficult moments, you foster resilience and clarity. Imagine how much more effective you would be if, instead of dwelling on failures, you analyzed them rationally and encouraged yourself to improve. Respecting yourself in speech also means setting boundaries with your own mind. Just as you would shut down an external bully, you must learn to shut down unhelpful, repetitive self-criticism. Challenge negative thoughts with the same scrutiny you would apply to an unfair accusation from someone else. Ask yourself, is this true? Is it useful? Would I say this to someone I care about? If the answer is no, then it has no place in your internal dialogue. Changing the way you speak to yourself requires awareness and deliberate effort. Most people operate on autopilot, allowing habitual negative thoughts to run unchecked. But just like training a muscle, you can retrain your mind to adopt a different pattern. At first, it may feel unnatural, but over time, it will become your default state. The goal is not to be constantly cheerful or overly optimistic. It is to develop a balanced, respectful way of engaging with yourself. This means recognizing difficulties without catastrophizing them, acknowledging progress without downplaying it, and allowing yourself the same level of understanding and patience that you extend to others. When you shift your internal language in this way, everything else follows: your actions, your confidence, your ability to navigate challenges, and ultimately, the trajectory of your life. The way people speak to themselves is often so habitual that they don't even recognize the damage it causes. Negative self-talk is sneaky, creeping into daily thoughts and reinforcing beliefs that keep people stuck. Many don't question these thoughts because they assume they reflect reality, but they don't. They reflect patterns that were learned, repeated, and ingrained over time. The good news is that anything learned can be unlearned, and anything ingrained can be rewired. Negative self-talk tends to operate in absolutes. It tells you that you always mess up, that you never get things right, that you'll never be good enough. These statements are rarely true, yet they shape perception as if they are. The brain tends to filter out information that contradicts existing beliefs. If you believe you're incapable, you will unconsciously focus on failures and ignore successes, even small ones. If you believe you're not worthy, you'll dismiss compliments and reinforce criticism. It's not because these things are objectively true. It's because the mind seeks consistency. It tries to maintain alignment between beliefs and reality, even if those beliefs are harmful. Challenging negative self-talk begins with awareness. You must catch these thoughts as they arise, observe them, and question them. Most people don't realize how often they speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to someone they love. Imagine saying to a friend, "You'll never succeed. You always mess up. You're just not good enough." No one would tolerate such treatment, yet people say these things to themselves constantly. If it's not acceptable for others, why should it be acceptable for you? Once awareness is developed, the next step is to replace negative self-talk with constructive dialogue. This does not mean replacing every negative thought with blind positivity. If you fail at something, it's not helpful to pretend it didn't happen or to dismiss it entirely. But there is a difference between saying, "I'm a complete failure," and saying, "It didn't go as planned, but I can learn from it." The first statement is a judgment, while the second is an observation with room for growth. Constructive dialogue requires precision. Instead of vague, sweeping criticisms, focus on specifics. If you made a mistake, identify what went wrong and what can be done differently next time. If you're struggling with something, acknowledge the difficulty without defining yourself by it. Language matters. Saying, "I'm terrible at this," is very different from saying, "I'm still learning this skill." One reinforces a fixed mindset, while the other keeps the door open for growth. People often think their negative self-talk is just a form of self-discipline, a way to hold themselves accountable. But there is a difference between self-discipline and self-punishment. Discipline acknowledges mistakes while encouraging better action. Punishment tears down confidence and motivation, making improvement even harder. If your goal is to become better, you need to be on your own side. No one improves under constant harsh criticism, not from others and not from themselves. One of the most damaging aspects of negative self-talk is how it reinforces identity. The more you tell yourself something, the more you begin to believe it as an unchangeable truth. Saying, "I'm not smart enough" becomes a belief rather than a temporary struggle. Saying, "I'm always anxious" solidifies anxiety as an identity rather than a state that can be worked on. Language shapes identity, and identity shapes behavior. When you repeatedly tell yourself something, your brain starts looking for ways to make it true. If you constantly call yourself lazy, you are more likely to act in ways that reinforce that label. If you instead say, "I'm learning to be more disciplined," you are framing yourself as someone who is actively improving. Replacing negative self-talk with constructive dialogue is not about ignoring flaws. It's about addressing them in a way that leads to growth rather than self-destruction. It means treating yourself with the same patience, respect, and understanding that you would offer to someone you care about. It means allowing room for mistakes without making them a defining factor. It means speaking to yourself as though your words have power, because they do. When you care about someone, you don't tear them down when they make a mistake. You don't berate them for their shortcomings or discourage them when they're struggling. Instead, you offer support, advice, and encouragement. You remind them of their strengths, help them navigate their difficulties, and push them toward their potential. Yet, when it comes to speaking to ourselves, most people don't extend the same courtesy. They are their own worst critics, quick to highlight their flaws and slow to recognize their progress. The way you talk to yourself matters. If you wouldn't say it to a close friend, you shouldn't say it to yourself. Self-talk is not just a passive habit, it shapes your mindset, your confidence, and your behavior. Every time you speak to yourself, you reinforce an internal narrative. If that narrative is filled with self-doubt, harsh criticism, and negativity, it will influence the way you see yourself and the choices you make. If you constantly tell yourself you're not good enough, that message seeps into your actions. You hesitate, you avoid challenges, you stop believing in your own potential. On the other hand, if your self-talk is constructive and encouraging, you build resilience, confidence, and a mindset that helps you grow. One of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking that being hard on themselves is necessary for improvement. They believe that self-criticism will push them to do better, that if they go easy on themselves, they will become complacent. But there is a difference between accountability and self-destruction. Holding yourself to high standards is important, but tearing yourself down in the process is not. Imagine a coach who only insults their team, never acknowledging their strengths or progress. That kind of leadership doesn't inspire growth. It leads to discouragement and burnout. The same is true for the way you lead yourself. The key is to offer yourself the same advice you would give to someone you truly care about. If a friend was struggling with self-doubt, you wouldn't tell them to give up. You wouldn't say, "You're just not good enough. You should stop trying." Instead, you would remind them of their capabilities, encourage them to keep going, and help them see a way forward. If they failed at something, you wouldn't define them by that failure. You would tell them it's a setback, not a permanent reflection of who they are. When you start speaking to yourself in this way, everything changes. Instead of tearing yourself down for making a mistake, you acknowledge it, learn from it, and move forward. Instead of telling yourself you're not capable, you remind yourself that growth takes time. Instead of saying, "I'm terrible at this," you say, "I'm still learning, and I'll get better with practice." This shift in language might seem small, but it has a profound impact on your mindset. One way to practice this is to imagine that you are advising someone else. The next time you catch yourself thinking negatively about yourself, pause and ask, "What would I say if this were a friend? If someone I care about was feeling this way, how would I respond?" Then apply that same response to yourself. This helps separate the automatic negativity from a more rational, supportive perspective. It forces you to challenge harsh self-judgments and replace them with a more balanced and constructive dialogue. Another important aspect of this is learning to recognize and celebrate progress. Most people are quick to acknowledge their failures, but slow to recognize their achievements. They move the goalposts, always chasing the next success without appreciating how far they've come. But if you were encouraging a friend, you wouldn't only focus on what they still need to achieve. You would acknowledge their progress, remind them of their strengths, and celebrate their growth. You need to do the same for yourself. Recognizing even small improvements reinforces a mindset of progress rather than perfection. This doesn't mean ignoring areas where you need to improve. Yes, but just as you would give honest feedback to a friend, you need to be honest with yourself. But there is a difference between constructive criticism and destructive self-talk. Constructive criticism is focused on solutions. It asks, "How can I do better next time?" Destructive self-talk is focused on blame. It says, "I'm not good enough and I never will be." The way you phrase these thoughts determines their effect on your mindset and motivation. The most important thing to remember is that your internal dialogue is not just background noise. It is the foundation of your self-perception. If you constantly criticize yourself without offering encouragement, you are setting yourself up for failure before you even begin. But when you learn to talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you care about, you create a mindset that fuels growth, resilience, and success. Language is not just a tool for communication. It is a tool for shaping reality. The way you use words to describe yourself, your experiences, and your future has a profound impact on how you think, feel, and act. Many people go through life with vague, unclear language when it comes to their goals, their identity, and their purpose. They say things like, I just want to be happy, or I need to get my life together. But these statements are so broad that they provide no direction. If you want to change your life, you must learn to use precise language. You must define exactly what you want, who you are, and how you intend to get there. The human mind thrives on clarity. When you give it a clear direction, it can start working towards solutions. When you provide it with vague, undefined statements, it has nowhere to go. If someone says, I need to be more productive, that sounds like a reasonable goal. But what does it actually mean? Does it mean waking up earlier, finishing more projects, eliminating distractions? Without precise language, the brain cannot create an actionable plan. But if that same person says, I will wake up at 6 a.m. every day, limit my social media use to 30 minutes, and complete one major task before noon, now there is a clear direction. The more specific you are, the more likely you are to follow through. The same applies to how you define yourself. Many people speak about themselves in ways that limit their potential. They say, I'm not a disciplined person, or I'm just bad at relationships. These statements are not just observations. They are declarations of identity. The more you repeat them, the more they solidify into reality. Instead of defining yourself in limiting terms, use language that opens the door for change. Instead of saying, I'm bad with money, say, I'm learning to manage my finances more effectively. Instead of saying, I always procrastinate, say, I'm working on improving my time management skills. Small changes in wording can create a significant shift in mindset. Precision in language also applies to how you interpret challenges. When something goes wrong, people often use exaggerated, negative language that distorts reality. If someone fails a test, they might say, I'm a complete failure. But failing a test does not mean a person is a failure. It means they performed poorly on one specific task at one specific moment. Instead of saying, I'll never succeed, a more precise statement would be, I need to adjust my approach and try again. Words shape perception, and perception shapes response. When you use overly negative or exaggerated language, you create unnecessary suffering. But when you describe situations accurately, you put yourself in a position to learn and improve. Another area where precise language is essential is in how you set expectations for yourself. People often use vague, undefined expectations that set them up for failure. They say, I need to be better, or I have to stop making mistakes. But what does a better mean? What kind of mistakes are they referring to? Without specifics, these statements only create frustration. A more precise expectation would be, I will spend 30 minutes each morning reviewing my goals, or I will improve my communication by listening more attentively and pausing before I respond. When expectations are clear and measurable, they become achievable. The words you use also influence how you handle adversity. If you describe a difficult situation as unbearable, your brain will respond accordingly, making it feel even more overwhelming. But if you describe it as a challenging but manageable, you create a sense of control. If you tell yourself, I can't handle this, you reinforce a feeling of helplessness. But if you say, this is difficult, but I will find a way through it, you shift your mindset toward problem solving. The way you frame a situation determines how you experience it. People often underestimate the power of the words they use, especially in their internal dialogue. But every word carries weight. Every phrase you repeat strengthens a belief, whether helpful or harmful. If you constantly tell yourself, I don't have what it takes, that belief will shape your actions. But if you tell yourself, I am capable and I will figure this out, that belief will push you forward. Language is not just a reflection of reality. It is a tool for creating reality. The more precise and empowering your words are, the more control you gain over your thoughts, emotions, and actions. The words you use shape the way you see yourself and the world around you. Most people don't realize that the way they speak, both internally and externally, determines the direction of their lives. Language is not neutral. It is either working for you or against you. When you constantly use words that reinforce doubt, limitation, and helplessness, you build an identity around those ideas. But when you deliberately choose words that reflect strength, resilience, and purpose, you begin to embody those qualities. And this is why it is crucial to speak in a way that moves you forward rather than holds you back. Many people unconsciously use disempowering language. They say things like, I can't handle this, I'm not good at that, or I always mess things up. These statements are not just expressions of frustration. They are powerful reinforcements of identity. The more you say them, the more you believe them. The more you believe them, the more they shape your actions. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you are not good at something, you will avoid opportunities to improve. If you constantly say that life is unfair, you will look for evidence that supports that belief and ignore opportunities that contradict it. The language you use determines what you focus on, and what you focus on becomes your reality. One of the most effective ways to shift your mindset is to become conscious of the words you use and replace disempowering language with words that create possibility. Instead of saying, I have to do this, say, I get to do this. Instead of saying, I'm terrible at this, say, I am improving every day. Instead of saying, I can't handle this, say, this is challenging, but I will find a way through it. Now, these small shifts may seem insignificant, but they have a profound impact on how you perceive yourself and your abilities. Another way language influences your mindset is through the labels you assign to yourself. People often say things like, I'm a procrastinator, I'm an anxious person, or I'm just not disciplined. These statements turn temporary struggles into fixed identities. The more you define yourself in limiting ways, the harder it becomes to change. Instead of saying, I am a procrastinator, say, I have a habit of procrastinating, but I am working on improving my time management. Instead of saying, I'm just not disciplined, say, I am developing more discipline every day. The way you frame your identity determines what you believe is possible for you. If you see yourself as someone who is capable of change, you will act accordingly. The words you use also shape your emotional state. When you describe an experience as horrible or impossible, your brain responds by amplifying stress and frustration. But if you describe the same experience as a challenging or a learning opportunity, your brain shifts into problem-solving mode. The language you choose determines how you experience situations. If you tell yourself, this situation is unbearable, your mind will look for ways to validate that statement, making it even harder to handle. But if you say, this is difficult, but I am strong enough to get through it, you create a mindset that allows you to navigate adversity more effectively. It is also important to be mindful of how you use language when setting goals. Many people say things like, I hope I can do this, or I'll try to get it done. These statements leave room for doubt and hesitation. Instead, use definitive language. Say, I will accomplish this, or I am committed to making this happen. When you use firm, decisive language, you send a clear message to your brain that you are serious about your goals. This shift in language reinforces confidence and determination. The way you talk about your future also matters. If you constantly say, I don't know if things will ever get better, you are programming your mind to expect uncertainty and struggle. But if you say, I am working toward a better future every day, you create a mindset of progress and possibility. The words you use set the tone for what you believe is achievable. If you speak about your future in uncertain or negative terms, you will hesitate to take action. But if you speak about it with clarity and confidence, you will move forward with purpose. Language is one of the most powerful tools you have for shaping your reality. Every word you choose either strengthens you or weakens you. If you consistently use words that reflect doubt, fear, and limitation, your mind will align with those ideas. But if you deliberately choose words that reflect strength, growth, and confidence, you will begin to embody those qualities. The way you speak to yourself and about yourself determines the path you take in life. The way you speak to yourself not only shapes your mindset, but also determines the level of action you take. Many people underestimate the power of their internal dialogue, failing to recognize that every thought, every phrase, and every belief they reinforce through language either propels them forward or holds them back. If you continuously tell yourself that you will take action someday, that now isn't the right time, or that you would just need to wait for motivation, you are programming yourself for inaction. If you want to change your life, you must speak to yourself in a way that drives you to take immediate, meaningful action. One of the most common ways people sabotage their progress is through the language of procrastination. They say things like, "I'll start tomorrow. I just need to be in the right mindset," or "I'll wait until I feel ready." These statements may seem harmless, but they create a pattern of avoidance. Readiness is a myth. There will never be a perfect moment when everything aligns and you feel completely prepared. The only way to become ready is to take action before you feel like it. If you continue to tell yourself that you need to wait for the right circumstances, you will remain stuck. Instead, shift your language to statements like, "I start now. I take action even when I don't feel like it. And I make progress today no matter what." When you change the way you talk about action, you shift from hesitation to momentum. The way you phrase your goals also influences the likelihood of achieving them. Many people set vague, non-committal goals using phrases like, "I want to get healthier," "I should read more," or "I need to be more productive." These statements lack clarity, making it easy to avoid taking action. Instead, you must use language that is specific, measurable, and actionable. Replace "I want to get healthier" with "I will exercise for 30 minutes every morning." Instead of "I should read more," say, "I will read 20 pages every night before bed." The clearer and more direct your language is, the easier it becomes to follow through. Another powerful shift in self-talk is moving from passive to active language. People often say things like, "I wish I could do that," "I hope I can change," or "I'd love to be successful." These statements place control outside of themselves, as if success or progress is dependent on luck or external factors. But growth is not something that happens to you. It is something you create. Instead of saying, "I hope I can change," say, "I am committed to changing." Instead of saying, "I wish I could do that," say, "I am taking steps to make it happen." Shifting from wishful thinking to decisive language creates a mindset of ownership and responsibility. The way you talk to yourself in difficult moments also determines how you handle adversity. When you face challenges, do you say, "This always happens to me," "I never get a break," or "Why does everything have to be so hard?" If so, you are reinforcing a victim mindset, one that focuses on external circumstances rather than personal agency. Instead, reframe your language to reflect resilience and problem solving. Instead of "Why does this always happen to me?" ask, "What can I learn from this?" Instead of "I never get a break," say, "I create my own opportunities." Instead of "This is too hard," say, "This is a challenge I will overcome." The language you use in tough situations determines whether you spiral into helplessness or rise with determination. Self-discipline is another area where language plays a critical role. Many people struggle with consistency because they allow their emotions to dictate their actions. They say things like, "I just don't feel motivated today," or "I'll get back on track when I have more energy." But discipline is not about how you feel. It's about what you commit to doing, regardless of how you feel. The most successful people don't wait for motivation. They act despite the absence of it. Instead of saying, "I don't feel like doing this today," say, "I do what needs to be done, no matter how I feel." Instead of "I'll start when I'm in the mood," say, "I take action even when I don't feel like it." Action, even when I don't feel like it. The more you reinforce discipline through language, the more naturally it becomes a part of your character. Accountability is another crucial aspect of self-talk. People who struggle with consistency often use language that shifts blame away from themselves. They say, "I didn't have time, things got in the way," or "It wasn't my fault." While external factors can be challenging, true growth comes from taking full ownership of your actions. Instead of saying, "I didn't have time," say, "I didn't prioritize it." Instead of "things got in the way," say, "I allowed distractions to take over." This shift in language forces you to take responsibility, which is the foundation of self-improvement. When you stop making excuses and start holding yourself accountable, you gain control over your progress. The way you talk to yourself about failure also determines how you respond to setbacks. Many people say, I failed, so I guess I'm not good enough, or maybe this just isn't for me. These statements reinforce the idea that failure is an identity rather than a learning process up for hate. Instead, reframe failure as feedback. Instead of saying, I failed, say, I learned what doesn't work. Instead of I'm not good enough, say, I am improving with every attempt. The most successful people are not those who avoid failure, but those who use it as a stepping stone to mastery. If you change the way you talk about failure, you will change the way you respond to it. The language you use on a daily basis determines the level of action you take in life. If your words reinforce hesitation, procrastination, and doubt, your actions will reflect that. But if your words reinforce discipline, responsibility, and resilience, you will move forward with clarity and confidence. Every time you speak to yourself, you are either programming your mind for success or setting yourself up for stagnation. If you want to change your life, you must start by changing the way you talk to yourself.